Hello and welcome to Bowser Sports. And hello, Steeler fans. What is going on with the desperate Steelers? Are we really sitting here on April Fool's Day and the owner, Art Rooney, makes it seem like, hey, everything's great? Positive signs towards the Steelers signing quarterback Aaron Rodgers. That's what he said today to reporters. There was nothing new. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, we'll know something soon. What on earth has happened to your grandfather's Pittsburgh Steelers where they had standards, where they didn't act desperate for a 42-year-old quarterback? I don't know what is going on with this group other than to say Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years, and as a result, he's desperate for a quarterback who won a Super Bowl. Mind you, it was against Mike Tomlin in 2010. When Rodgers played in a pass oriented offense around his skill sets, the Steelers are not that way. So why are we waiting for Aaron Rodgers? It was great to see Rodgers, you know, doing some kind of what I think publicity of throwing some footballs to DK Metcalf. Why wasn't there a deadline given? He's out on the beach thinking about what's next, contemplating his next move. Well, his next move wasn't the Giants. It still isn't the Steelers. And apparently the Vikings said thanks, but no thanks. And then a few days later, a week later, they say, oh, well, wait, maybe. So is Rodgers just holding out, hoping that the Vikings will change their mind when they've got J.J. McCarthy in year two and completely a rookie because he didn't play last year because of his knee? So what's going to happen? The deadline's already passed with Atlanta and that whole situation with his salary. So are the Falcons going to trade Cousins now? They don't really have a lot of need to beyond just moving on from a guy who's not happy. Is that what the Steelers' backup plan is now? It's to give Aaron Rodgers all this time, and then if he doesn't make a decision to come here at a certain point, say the draft, that they'll go back to Atlanta and try to make a deal? I mean, we're not talking about a much better quarterback at this point, Rodgers versus Cousins, other than a few years age difference. Both coming off problems, both rather older. They don't have big arms. So we'll see. With Cousins, if anything, maybe in June. New Orleans is unlikely to move on from Derek Carr. So really, it is the Rodgers show. I think everyone's seen all signs point toward Rodgers making that decision to come play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Frankly, I'd rather Steelers hold, move on, go with Mason as the first string quarterback, go sign a free agent quarterback, and go in the season with three quarterbacks. Go get some undrafted free agent quarterback as your fourth. There is no need to spend any draft capital in this draft. The quarterbacks aren't good enough. out of the chute. So take your lumps with Mason and move on to 2026 with your quarterback solution. That's what I have for today. I don't know what you guys are thinking out there with Steeler fans. This has to be frustrating to see the team still waiting, being desperate, looking desperate. So we'll see what happens. I would think we're probably a week or two out at best. And then we'll see what happens in a few weeks after that with the draft coming up here. Now, moving on, let's just say they do decide to get this all done. And I say they because maybe Rodgers is holding out for some extra money, though it sounds like that's not the case. But let's just say everything's good. Rodgers finally decides to play in Pittsburgh. Is this a good enough offense? Is there the elite talent to help Rodgers be successful in Pittsburgh? I think Jalen Warren is a good running back. I think he's what you call starter capable. I don't think he's a 1. He might be a 1B, more likely a 2. And so already you're wondering about your running back with a 42-year-old quarterback. You are going to need to have a strong running game. Will the Steelers then decide if they sign Rodgers? How does that influence their first round pick? Does that mean they're going to go look for another wide receiver for the third spot over Roman Wilson or Kelvin Austin? Are they going to go running back with someone like Omarion Hampton? Highly doubtful Ashton Genty's going to fall that far at this point. I also think first round running back is about the dumbest thing you could do. Do I need to remind you of Najee Harris, who was overdrafted in the first round? At tight end, I'm not sure about Pat Freiermuth. I think he's a nice tight end. He's had his moments. He's also had his not so great moments. So what are they going to do at tight end? Boy, if there's a shock of Tyler Warren dropping to the Steelers at 21, you got to seriously think about Tyler Warren as the first round pick. If you think he is a more elite Penn State tight end than Pat Freiermuth. It definitely isn't going to be Darnell Washington or anyone with the last name of Hayward. So the Steelers do have a little bit of a weakness there at tight end. Again, not going to waste a first round pick on a tight end when you've got a $18 million guy in Freiermuth. So that's off the board. So you're unlikely to address your first round picks at running back or tight end. I would be shocked if they're going to use a first round pick on a wide receiver after trading a second to get DK Metcalf. So the only way I see that happening is if the team decides to move on from George Pickens and trade him to get hopefully a second round pick back. But then you created a hole, which forces you basically at that point to use your first or second round pick to replace Pickens. In this draft, I'm not enamored with those guys who are being projected in that first round slot. I don't think there's any, big wide receiver. I think Matthew Golden's probably the one guy who's, fast. But I don't know if he's that George Pickens elite, matchup problem, which I think for the Steelers they're going to need to exploit if Rodgers is the quarterback. You need a guy who's a good route runner, probably better than Pickens. I don't think Pickens is as good as he should be, and maybe that's just because the route tree is limited under Art Smith. So I don't know about a first round. Again, so there's three spots. I think Roman Wilson, Kelvin Austin are going to be good for your third, fourth string guys. So now we're looking at offensive line. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need an offensive line. He's going to be throwing that ball quick. It's going to be like Ben Roethlisberger's last year, how fast that ball was coming out of his hands. So I don't see the offensive line getting addressed. Not in the first round, excuse me. And it's not going to be a quarterback for the long term, right? It's not going to be Jackson Dart. They're not going to win now, where Tomlin's air quote job's on the line. Not going to happen, by the way. Needs to happen. It won't. They won't even fire coordinators. They don't change much. So we're pretty certain, that you look at the draft and then you look at what the Steelers need on offense. From a starter position perspective, they don't really need one. I think running back, but you're not going to spend a first round pick on a running back. Unless the Steelers decide to drop back. And that might not be a bad thing to recoup, the lost second round pick if they decide to drop back later in the first round and get that second round running back maybe. Or maybe they decide to, if it's in the 28 to 32 spot, maybe they decide to go after a Hampton or a Judkins or a Travion Henderson, though I think the running back I most prefer would be in the second round. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I think he fits this offense. His style fits Art Smith's style. That's the running back I would be going after, but he's not you're not going to spend a first round pick on that, so, or even an early second. So Rodgers is actually why they're probably so desperate, because Rodgers' reputation makes it seem like this offense could go pretty well. That you got everyone named and lined up in their spots. That's probably why they're desperate for Aaron. Why they're willing to hold out for as long as it takes. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. I think it's going to come to a head in another week or two. I don't think Art Rooney's going to want to keep this much longer. But at that point, who's he moving to? Mason Rudolph. So this could go on for a long time if he decides, you know what, I've got Mason. We'll give Rodgers to the draft, and if we don't, we'll make a move. Right before the draft, they'll go get someone. So that's the depth chart. I think that's what's going to happen. Rodgers will sign. Is that a Super Bowl winning team? I'm not so sure. They got holes to fill, and I'm not sure how they're going to fill them, because if you trade one, Pickens, you just open up another hole, forces you into a first or second round pick for a wide receiver. Then what do you do about your running back? So it is just, there's a domino effect here, folks. That's where I'm at with this team. I think they're built on a house of cards, of one injury, and they're in trouble. But let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think the Steelers are going to do if they get Aaron Rodgers. Do they go into more three wide receiver sets, or are they going to go into more of the two, which is Art Smith and Tomlin, traditionally being conservative guys? Are they going to go to double tight ends, triple tight end sets? It will be very interesting to see how Art Smith's offense can mesh with Aaron Rodgers, who likes to get the ball out quick, 42 years old, isn't going to want to take a hit. To him standing in the pocket like a bigger Mason Rudolph, like a Ryan Tannehill before with Smith in Tennessee. This is probably the most confounding offseason of the Steelers that I can ever remember. Such a strange offseason. All right, well, that will do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave a comment down below about what you thought about this episode and thoughts that may have been provoked by some of my comments. Let's give it a whirl and let's have some discourse. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a like. If you haven't subscribed, it's free to do. Please hit that subscribe button. There'll be more content coming as the days go by on the Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins. A lot to talk about. Not all of it great. The only team who has an upward trajectory is probably the Penguins. And we'll touch on them shortly here this week. Thanks for listening. Until next time, have a good one.